Welcome to a new webinar from Good World Languages. We really appreciate you being here. I'd like to welcome you again to this new webinar, which is Strategies to Maximize the Presentational Mode, both in speaking and writing. This is what part of our new series of webinars with FFLA, and we are really glad to have in here Linda Villadóniga. I'd like to present her. So Linda has a master's in education from the Monterey Institute of International Studies, now Middlebury in Monterey, California, of course. She is the former department chair and coordinator of Advanced International Certificate of Education program at San Augustine High School. She has been recognized as Florida Teacher of the Year by FFLA, and she served as president of the association as well. She is an active presenter at local, regional, national, and international levels, and she also has active roles in the Florida chapter of AATSP. She's the conference coordinator, state poster contest coordinator, and the editor of La Voz newsletter. And she's also recipient of the AATSP Distinguished Leadership Award. Thank you very much for being here, Linda.
Thank you. Okay, we are going to talk about the presentational mode. We're going to discuss what it is, what the standards are for Florida, but I want to mention that even though I live in Florida, so the standards that I am most comfortable with are those that are in Florida, but the Florida standards are totally based on the actual standards. So you will see very similar wording for the standards and for the benchmarks. Then we'll talk about what should and can learners do at each level, in low, intermediate, and high, sometimes in reverse order. And how do we maximize what the learner can and should do at each level? And then the strategies we can use to enhance the learner's learning. Sounds a little redundant, doesn't it?
Perfect. So to do a small warm-up, please, everyone, you can use the chat now, and we would appreciate if you can tell us what state do you teach in, what levels do you teach, and what languages do you teach? We'll give us a few minutes and I'll read the answers to you, Linda. So we have someone that is for German 1 for AP, Missouri, if I'm not wrong. Then we have a teacher from Florida as well for Spanish, then Spanish and EL in Nebraska. This year, this person is teaching Spanish 1 and 2. Then Tennessee, Spanish 1, 2, and 3. New Jersey with German middle school. Spanish in New Jersey, K5. KA French. Texas, French 1 middle school. North Carolina, high school Japanese. Interesting.
Yes.
Yes. We also have Ohio, elementary and Spanish. Englewood, New Jersey with Spanish 2H, 3, and 3H. Massachusetts, Spanish levels 1 to 5. New Jersey, high school Spanish. K3 Spanish. Yes, we also have German, again, beginning, intermediate, advanced levels in Minnesota. We have lots of answers, so this is just a scope. I don't know if you'd like to know a bit more. Also French, of course. Long Island. We have a wide variety of teachers.
Wow, I
here.
should say so. Good.
Now we have this question. I'm going to share now a link, which is for a Padlet. You can either use the QR code you see in the screen or the link. And we would appreciate if you can tell us, what does the presentational mode mean to you and how do you incorporate it into your teaching practices? Again, we're going to give a few minutes and I'm going to read the answers in a second. Okay, we actually have one answer, which is the student is able to present ideas orally or in writing, with or without a lot of preparation. We also have audio recording or live spoken presentation. It means presenting information in writing or speaking. Someone mentioned, to be honest, I don't know,
Oh,
but I am open and hungry to learn.
oh,
And
good.
we will give you that in here, so thank you. Short conversation or writing. Okay. Any oral or written communication. It is when students present written or spoken material in the classroom, having been introduced to some sort of material, whether new or previous. Communicating your knowledge to a group, projects, research, scribing. It is a tool to have students present something they love, oral or writing. Presentational mode means productive skills. It is when students show what they have learned through oral or written production. And we're having tons of other replies. I'm not sure if
Oh,
you want to
wonderful.
hear some more, Linda, or if you would like to move on
No,
to the next
I
one.
think I think they know exactly what presentational means. So that's good. That's good. It's a good place to start.
Perfect. Now let's go to the second question, also on the Padlet. I'm gonna share the link here. Also, thank you everyone for replying. Here is the link. Again, you can use the QR code. And now we'd love to hear what are the main challenges you encounter when incorporating the presentational mode into your language teaching. Perfect, we're getting some replies. So we have as challenges giving feedback, students' fear of speaking, also knowing how to assess the students.
Mm.
Uh, that students are more reluctant to speak extemporaneously, that they are intimidated by speaking. Students are nervous or with fear of judgment. How to keep the audience engaged and accountable, that's true. Students not wanting to talk for fear of making a mistake and assessment. Google Translate, true.
Yes.
Uh, yes, shyness, unwillingness to speak, perfecting how to assess the presentations, finding rubrics that really evaluate this mode. Also,
Mm.
uh,
Mm.
students copy from AI instead of thinking. So yes, for what I'm seeing, the many things are AI, the shyness, the fear of speaking, and also too many students in a class as well. Yes. Would you like to hear some more answers, Linda, or should we
Nope,
move on?
that's a good representation, I think. I've been jotting things down. I think that's a good, really good spectrum. Okay, so let's start with the presentational mode. Two parts, it's presentational speaking and presentational writing. And you've nailed it with your answers. So I'm confident that you know what it is, so I'm not gonna expand on that. And you know that it's oral or written. Next slide, please. Okay, these are the standards for Florida. And like I said, they are basically the ACTFL standards. We've changed a little bit, but the language is the same. So for presentational speaking, the overarching goal is the student will be able to present information, concepts, and ideas to an audience of listeners on a variety of topics in a culturally appropriate context in the target language. They are talking to someone. This is not an exchange of ideas. It's not interpersonal. It is absolutely me talking or the student talking to an audience. Same with presentational writing. The student will be able to present information, concepts, and ideas to an audience of readers on a variety of topics in culturally appropriate context and target language. Again, it's like an author talking about his or her ideas, but could be fiction, it could be nonfiction, whatever the teacher wants the student to do. And sometimes when the student is writing, and I'm going to jump ahead here a little bit, but because the idea just came to my head and I don't want to forget it. Many times, especially in the higher levels, when you say to a student, I want you to write an essay, 5-paragraph essay, about da-da-da-da, whatever it is. And the reason you always say da-da-da-da, whatever it is because you want them to use the vocabulary and the tenses that you've been practicing. But every now and then, it's okay to give them free writing time. You can write about anything you want today, anything you want, 5 paragraphs on anything you want, what your hobbies are, what you want to do, whatever pops into your head, five paragraph essay on whatever you want. The fear of not being able to convey their ideas properly or correctly will inhibit most people, myself included. But if I'm free to express whatever is in my head at that moment, whether it be in written form or in spoken form, somehow frees you to, it's like, it's okay to make mistakes. And truly, it is okay to make mistakes. None of us is perfect. And I said this and during the last webinar as well. None of us is perfect, and we all make mistakes, sometimes because we don't know better, and sometimes because we're in such a hurry to get our ideas out that we lapse. So bear that in mind, please. And I always stress to my students that it's okay to make a mistake. If the goal is communication and you are communicating and the person can understand what you've written or said, then you've achieved your goal. It doesn't have to be perfect. If I say, ¿Dónde es el baño? Well, the person that I'm talking to or asking the question of, will he know what it is that I want? Of course he will. He might say, well, and then he'll correct. El baño está en la esquina. O el baño está en la parte trasera del restaurante. He understood you. Any reason to make that student absolutely, you have to be perfect, you have to use estar because it's location. As long as the student understands that it's okay to make a mistake and that the person he is speaking to will understand what the question is. That's the main thing. Communication is the main thing. And sooner or later, they'll be correcting themselves. Instead of using es, they'll use está. And that's part of the goal too. Same thing with writing. And I said this at the last, during the last webinar as well. I never graded papers in red ink. Never, never, ever. I used pink, purple, green, bright blue, anything but red, especially at the beginning, because a teacher that I taught with when I was teaching elementary school, fourth grade teacher, told me that she stopped using red ink because someone said to her one day, my gosh, that paper looks like you bled all over it. Granted, she was correcting every little mistake. But if a student sees red, automatically in their minds, because most teachers grade in red, automatically in their minds, they're going, oh, look at all the mistakes I made. When in reality, if you grade a paper in a different color, it doesn't have that shock value. So just a little something for you to put in the back of your mind. Next slide, please. So all of our books are aligned to Florida standards. But having said that, they are also aligned to ACTFL standards. And many times they are also, we also have the alignment for other states. California and New York come to mind, for example. You can get a copy of the correlations if you go to www.wl.com/Florida. You can get Florida, but I'm sure you can find the other ones, maybe by slashing New York, slashing California, slashing whatever. And you'll see this page, helping Florida students achieve proficiency. So that's some information for you. All right, let's talk about the presentational speaking, what students should be able to do. And these are the 3 levels. I chose 3 levels at random. I chose a low, a mid, and a high, just to just so that you can gauge where you are. These correlations are not correlations. These benchmarks are for world languages. So they're very generic. Any language, they are applicable to any language. At a novice low level, learners can present information about themselves and some other very familiar topics using single words or memorized phrases. That is presentational speaking. If you say to a student, ¿Cómo estás hoy? And he says, bien. He's talking to you. It's interpersonal in that case, but he's answered you. So remember that. He can also, as they start learning more vocabulary and you get them up, here's another recommendation. Get them up to do 30-second something at least once a week. So if you're in the chapter with family, the student can get up and say, yo tengo un padre que se llama, o mi padre se llama Juan, mi madre se llama Teresa, tengo dos hermanos, Jaime y Roberto, no tengo hermanas, mi mascota es un perro, se llama Rover. Presentational speaking. Is that practiced? Of course it is. Is it learned? Of course it is. Is it memorized? Of course it is. The patterns are. But think back to when you were a child or when your children were very small. They spoke in first monosyllabic words, and then polysyllabic words, and then sentences, and then in longer utterances. So the students you teach are there. That's where they are. They are still in the toddler level learning. Unless you have the advantage of having dual language immersion schools in your district, which my district does not. Those kids learn from kindergarten and pre-K on, and they just go. But they are pre-K and kindergartners. So they are at that level where they are still uttering one word answers a lot. At the novice mid, learners can present information about themselves and some other very familiar topics using a variety of words, phrases, and memorized expressions, keyword memorized. Don't expect them to come up with ideas. If they haven't learned it, they can't express it. You always have the one kid who wants to learn more and does more on his own or her own, but you can't expect everyone to do that. At the novice high, they can present basic information on familiar topics using language. They have practiced using phrases and simple sentences. Notice that that's novice high. At the low, they use single words and memorized phrases. At the novice mid, it's a variety of words, phrases, and memorized expressions. And then at the novice high, it's using practiced phrases and simple sentences. So it's very scaffolded. You cannot expect a novice low student to give a discourse or write an article. Next slide, please. For presentational writing, it's basically the same thing. They can copy some familiar words, characters, or phrases. You can put up some sentence starters. Me llamo blank. Mi padre blank. Mi madre blank. They copy that and then they fill in the blank as they can. Great way to practice vocabulary and sentence structure. Great way. Novice mid, learners write lists and memorized phrases on familiar topics. One of the things you can do is you've practiced the vocabulary in class. You've done activities in the workbook. You've done activities in the textbook. And then you want to you want the students to show you what they have retained. The next day is a warm-up. Say, write every word you can think of that was related to clothing, for example, if that's the lesson you're on. And they should be able to come up with at least 5 or 6 words that you've practiced the day before or several days before. So they can do that at novice mid-level. At novice high, they can present basic information on familiar topics. It's the same thing as speaking, only in written form. Next slide, please. Okay, some strategies. We've talked about some of them, excuse me, but these are strategies that you as the teacher can use. And why is it important for you to have strategies at your fingertips? Because you are imparting those strategies to your students. Remember that all students are not the same. I am a visual learner. I'm somewhat of an audio learner, but I'm more of a visual learner. Some kids are kinesthetic. They have to write those words. I give you an example that is not Spanish, German, French, or Italian related, but I volunteer at an elementary school down the street from me. And I work with 3rd graders primarily, who are either at the low end of achievement or at the high end. If it's the high end, it's enrichment. If it's the low end, it's encouragement and strategies. I was working with a group of students yesterday on their spelling words, and these were homophones. So one of them asked me, how can I tell the difference between cell with a C and cell with an S? I said, well, it's all context. But if I don't know what CELL means, then I can't understand even if it's in context. Now, these are third graders, so they know that they're looking for vocabulary in context. And I was stumped by that question. There were others that were easier to give them a strategy. And I said, well, that's a good question. And I thought about it. At the end of class, one of the kids stood up and said, my body is made up of cells with a C, but I can't sell S my body. And I said, you're right. There you go. You've got it. You have internalized. So you have to be able to give them strategies so that they can look at something and say, this is how I'm going to learn it. I have to do something to learn it, to learn the difference. You also have to know what each standard and benchmark requires student to do. If you teach using standards and benchmarks, then the accountability is that standard or benchmark. Another hint that I learned over 40 years of teaching: don't grade everything on an essay or everything in an oral presentation. Excuse me. Zero in on what you want to assess and tell the student what you're going to assess. You can come up with a simple rubric. There are rubrics out there that you can use. You can send me an email and I will send you all kinds of rubrics for assessing all kinds of things. But zero in on the specific thing that you are assessing. If you are assessing vocabulary, then you can do a little tick, tick every time they use family members relationship, padre, madre, hermano, whatever it is, a little tick. Does the student use 5, 6, 7, 10 family words? Yes. Has he met your benchmark? Yes. And move on. Does it matter if the verb isn't conjugated exactly right? No, not for that, because you're not zeroing in on the conjugation of the verb. Try to single, especially at the beginning when they're starting to learn, it's easier for them to concentrate on one thing than 5 or 6 things. I know we expect them to do that, but they can't. Remember, they're like the toddler who's learning to crawl and then to walk and then to run. And try just zeroing in on 1 or 2 particular items. What activities can you provide for the student to be able to meet each standard and benchmark? Come up with fun ideas that they can use, or ask them sometimes after you get to know them. John, how did you memorize yo tengo 7 años instead of yo soy 7 años? How did you remember that? And some bright kid will say, well, I think of, I have had 7 birthday parties. So that's how I remember that it's tengo instead of soy. Aha. And they're sharing that idea with somebody else, and somebody else's light bulb is just all of a sudden going on. Oh, yeah, I had a birthday yesterday. That was my 6th birthday. Wow, yes, I can remember it's have instead of, I use tener instead of ser. Things like that, little chispitas every now and then. And then great thing is to give them a set of can-do statements so that they can gauge their learning. Can-do statements, the actual can-do statements are available. I had them plastered on my walls for every level I taught. In the last couple of years I taught 4 levels. So I had them all up there. And when the kids came in, some of them, of course, not all of them, but some of them would look at them, and every 6 or 7 weeks, I would give them the can-do statements for that quarter and say, okay, check off the things that you feel confident you can do. And they did, and they learned from that. If they only had 2 things checked, well, then they knew that they better get on the stick and start, applying themselves a little more, and so on. Okay, next slide, please. So now we have another question here. Describe familiar experiences or events using both general and specific language. You look at that benchmark, and what does that mean to you? How do you interpret that? What are the important things in this benchmark? What do you have to do to help the learner reach the benchmark? And what does the student have to do? So the onus is on you as much as it is on the student. If you zero in too much on everything, you're not zeroing in on anything. So be as specific as you can. When you say describe familiar experiences or events using both general and specific language, just real quickly, just jot down something in the Q&A of what that means to you. What would you do with that benchmark? Can we do that, Sabrina?
Yes,
I can't hear you.
absolutely.
Yeah, okay. Just real quick.
Okay, perfect. So it would be the answers, right?
Yes, please.
Sure. Let's see, please. Everyone, feel free to use the chat at the moment. We'll see what they reply. Okay, so we can see that can talk about their school day, for example. We also have enrichment of personal experiences. Students are going to share something they have experienced. Talking about family description, for example.
Mhm.
What else? Home, school, and family life, their hobbies. They can talk and write about their spare time favorite activities, about vacation. That's a really good one. What else? Exactly, an enjoyable vacation, the school day, or what they do outside of school, familiar topics to them. This benchmark can also work with talking about favorite or non-favorite foods and meals, uh, about what's happening right now in social media. There's a lot.
Mm.
Most important, describe family celebrations, being very specific and relate it to the topic that you're currently learning. Also, to help students meet this goal, provide examples with comprehensible input, seasonal activities. Great, this can be a great way to help them express social emotional vocabulary
Mm.
like mental health and fears they face. I mean, there are too many
There's
amazing
lots. It's
answers.
wonderful. Wow, you guys are really thinking this morning. That's awesome. Yes, it has to be a familiar experience. Why? Because they feel more comfortable speaking about something that they are familiar with than if you just say, write about butterflies. Well, I mean, I can tell you about 3 things about butterflies. Um, and that wouldn't be enough for a novice high. So there you go. Also, and this is, I'm just going to throw this out and you can just raise your hands maybe or something. How, what is easier in your experience? What is easier for a student to do? To speak about a familiar experience or to write about a familiar experience? Just put an S or a W. That's all we need.
Ooh, we have lots of W's,
Uh-huh.
lots of them.
Lots of W's. And
Also
I'm going to
very
venture to
also
say that
S's.
the W, that those of you who put W is because the student doesn't feel like he's in the spotlight. And the fear is gone, or not maybe gone, but it's dissipated some. If they are speaking, that spotlight is right on them. And regardless of how much they've practiced something, how well they know the vocabulary, the structure, and all that, they're still on the spot. And they're still, now, if you have the same student for 2 or 3 years, hopefully there's a familiarity there and they're not afraid. They know you, they know that you're not going to criticize every little thing they said. But writing is kind of like almost like an out-of-body experience where they're going to write something, you're going to turn it in, or they're going to turn it in, you're going to look at it, you're zeroing in on whatever it is that you want to assess. They know that. They have a rubric that you've given them. And it's like the fear is gone. They know they're going to make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. I keep saying that because it's true. But the fear is gone. The spotlight is no longer on them. So for me, I would have them write it so that they can practice it. Does it have to be then presented verbatim? No, but at least they have a solid base. And the fear dissipates a little bit. Never gone. I mean, I am nervous today, and my gosh, I've been at this for a very long time. Started teaching at 21, and I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but it was a long time ago. And And I still get nervous when I speak in front of a group. I always think there's somebody out there who knows a whole lot more than I do about this topic. I've had to, get over myself there a bit, but it's okay. But yes, I agree that writing is much easier for the student than the speaking. And it's for all those reasons that were stated here. So that's really good. What do you have to do? Thank you, Cheryl. I'm very honest. I'm brutally honest sometimes. What do you have to do to help the learner reach the benchmark? We've talked around it. One is make sure they understand what's expected. This takes time because there are a lot of benchmarks, a lot of standards, a lot of benchmarks. You don't have to have a long list, but at least have a general idea. And the can-do statements here are wonderful for this because then you can zero in on things. And then you know what you have to do as the teacher to get your students there. They won't all make it at the same time, obviously not. And no child is like somebody else exactly. So, and then giving them the can-do statements, they also know what is expected of them. And we can feel good about the fact that they are using the can-do statements and trying to reach them, sometimes just to impress you. And isn't that a wonderful feeling? It's such a wonderful feeling when you know that that child who struggles wants to impress you. I'm going to give you another example. I am part of the Florida State Spanish Conference, which is a competition for high school students who are enrolled in Spanish. They range from all levels. The A's are the ones that are learning Spanish in school and have no outside contact. The B's are the students who are learning in school, but may have a little bit of contact. They may have traveled to Mexico, Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, Costa Rica. The C's are basically your heritage speakers who have been born and raised in the United States and whose parents and heritage is Hispanic, or they came from a Spanish speaking country before the age of 9, and then they're considered heritage speakers to a point. And then the D's are the native speakers. So, oh my gosh, I lost my train of thought explaining what that was. See, it happens to all of us. Here I am in the spotlight. Oh shoot. I'll get back to it because it'll come to me. The topics, because they all have to do a 2-minute impromptu speech. They have the topics ahead of time. They're on our website. I used those topics for my oral speaking assessment. They're all ranges. So, they start with level 1 and go all the way up to level 6 being AP Lit. Starting with first year, at the end of the year, not at the beginning, but at the end of the year, third quarter forward, every week they had to do a minute in level 1. And I practiced it with them just the way we do it at the conference. The 16 topics are face down. They choose 3, then they choose 1. They think about it for a minute and then they talk. Having done that, by the time they got to level 3, they were so used to doing this that we could start week 1 with the previous level questions, and they would get up and whatever. I had 2 students who could not, even 4th year, could not speak in front of the class. They would get so nervous, they'd get jittery. The girl would start crying. The boy would just say, I can't do it. I can't do it. I had them turn around and face the board and do it. After 2 or 3 weeks of that, both of them came to me and said, I'm ready to face the class. And they did. But that was something that they had to realize, that talking to the board is not nearly as much fun as talking to a group. So that's a technique for the kids who are especially afraid of speaking to a crowd. Also, it gets everybody loosens their tongue a little bit because they know what the topics are. Some of them, will have written them out and practiced them because they don't know which one of the 16 they're going to get. And that's a good technique too. They've written it out, so that's presentational writing, and then they get up and give it, and it's presentational speaking. Boom, boom, you've knocked out 2 benchmarks at the same time. And what do the students have to do? Pay attention do their work, and give it their all. Next slide, please. Novice high for writing is the same thing. They have to provide basic information about themselves and in immediate surroundings, using words and phrases on a variety of topics and phrases, memorized expressions. This is high, so you expect their sentence structure, their basic sentence structure, to be near perfect. They could miss an accent mark. That's a debate going on right now in a group that I'm in. They may use imperfect when it should be preterite. They might use subjunctive wrong. Again, target what you're assessing. I don't want to say grading, assessing, please. Next, please. Okay, for mid, it's produce a simple factual presentation supported by multimedia components and visual displays. That's their crutch. That's their crutch. If they, just like my presentation is my crutch today, I can sit and talk to you for an hour and a half about anything that has anything related to language teaching and teaching in general for elementary school. But this is my crutch. I know where I'm supposed to be, and I know what I'm supposed to be focusing on because I have a presentation written out. That's what the kids need. And that crutch, when they get up to do a 5-minute presentation, which, by the way, this could be a group activity, as long as everybody has the same amount of time to talk. Then, because there's always a kid who'll say, I'll write it, but I don't want to speak. No, that doesn't work. They all have to write, they all have to speak, and they all have to present. But this is their little go-to. If they forget something, they can look at the screen and say, and move on. It has to be logically sequenced, unlike what I just did with the Spanish conference. But it's really important that they know that they have something that they can look at that will jog their memory. What do you have to do? Tell them that it's okay to use helpers. And because it has to be a multimedia component and there has to be a visual display, it doesn't get much easier than that. Okay, next, please. This is for intermediate writing. State an opinion and provide supporting evidence using connected sentences. To me, the main thing in that is providing supporting evidence. Why? Because that's what they'll have to do on an AP test, on a Cambridge test, or an IB test. When they get to that level, they will have to provide supporting evidence. It's something they start learning, at least in my district, in 2nd grade. Even 1st graders can pick out some supporting detail in something they've read and then incorporate that into their writing at that grade level. So I think I've answered the questions without asking your opinion, but your answers previously tell me that you know this, and I'm just trying to give you some of my experience with using these benchmarks and how I try to incorporate them, that past tense, tried to incorporate them when working with the students to get them to a level that you want them to be at. Ooh, that was a lousy English sentence. Sorry about that. Next, please. Advanced low, they can deliver a short presentation. You determine short. I would say that if they can do a minute and a half at the end of level 1, congratulations. Because it's a presentation on a social, academic, or work topic with appropriate complexity for the target audience. Target audience is the same as them, level 1 students. So they can talk about whatever they want. That's a good question, Lisa. I assessed it at least once a quarter, but I tried to do it at least twice per quarter, where it was a mandatory assessment. Same with writing. At the mid-quarter, I would say, okay, more or less, could be a week before, a week after. Okay, today you're going to write a 5-paragraph essay on blah, 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 whatever it was. And next Friday, we're going to do an oral presentation on another topic that they've studied. So optimally, you're assessing, I'm going to use the new words, you're going to give a formative assessment twice a quarter. You're going to do a formative assessment once a quarter, if that helps. My grandson uses this lingo with me all the time. And he looks at me and he goes, "Do you know what that is, abuela?" I go, "Yeah, I know what that is. That's the old quiz and the old test, just new words." And he goes, "Oh, you do know that?" "Yeah, hello, I do." But he thinks, he's a big old sixth grader now, so he throws those words around. And I asked him one day, "Are you having a summative or a formative?" And he goes, "Formative." I go, "Okay, good. It means it counts more, right?" He goes, "Yeah, it counts more." Okay, So they know, and it doesn't hurt for them to hear summative and formative and all of that. I think those are, what are some examples of can-do statements? I'm glad you asked. I think I have some here. Maybe, and maybe not. It's something very basic. It's like, I can write familiar words, something like that. I used to have a list of them, and I don't know what happened to them. And I thought I looked for them and I couldn't find them. And then I thought I had, but I didn't. But it's something very simple. You can get them from Actful as well. They might even be online somewhere. You don't even have to write to Actful. You can just find them online. Next slide, please. Advanced low writing, same things. Make sure that this is great. Work-related documents. A lot of high school students work. They don't have a clue what resume is. As freshmen, they don't, or sophomores. They start learning about resumes as they're juniors or seniors because they are preparing an application to go to college or whatever. But a lot of the younger students have no idea. So one way of doing that would be give them something real easy, an application to work at McDonald's. I mean, how difficult can that be? It's your name and your address and whatever. So that's what they need to be able to do. The key here, of course, is that the document is in Spanish. So they have to know certain things: nombre, dirección, número de teléfono, móvil, dirección electrónica, stuff like that. So, and then they're not answering in the target language, but they have to be able to understand what the questions are asking. Oh, thank you, Ronnie. Thank you. That's the link to the can-do statements. Awesome. Thank you very much. Next, please. So, reporteros 1, 2, 3 are out right now, and we're going to see some examples of some activities. Level 4 will be coming out in June, and then Mapas is also 1, 2, 3, 4. And it is, Reporteros is very student-friendly, very, very, very student-friendly, and it's very scaffolded. Mapas is a little bit more advanced, so it's good for those kids who have had Spanish since they were in kindergarten in the immersion program, or they have it every day, or however it is, that they're already learning. They have 8 or 9 years behind them before they even reach high school level. It's a little bit more academic, maybe. It's a great program for IB or Cambridge, or even pre-AP and AP. I think that's my opinion. Yes, Reporteros is in French also. It's called something else, but in French, in Italian, and in German. And yes, you can order them. And Sabrina will tell you how later. Okay, next slide, please. From Reporteros 1, we're going to look at a couple of activities here from Reporteros 1. Presentational writing. You're going to look at the student. This is an actual page from the textbook. And you see a picture by, oh my gosh, I can't remember her name, Garzas. Carmen something Garza. I can't remember her whole name. I love these paintings of hers because they're very familial. And the kids, level 1, can do a lot with a picture like this. So this is presentational writing, very short. They're going to describe the place. And what are they going to answer? What is it? How is it? How is it like? What's it like? What do you see? And then, is it and then describe the picture in general. Is it neat? Is it sloppy? Is it chaotic? Using the words they know. This is a really, really good picture to start with. And she has a series of pictures. And they're all wonderful because there's so much information in them. And you again, control what it is you are checking for. Okay. All right, next, please. Presentational speaking. Okay, this one is at the end of the unit. There is a practice assessment, more or less. It's an IEP, not an IEP, an EPA, and or IPA. Sorry, IPA. Getting my acronyms mixed up. And at the end of every chapter unit, there is a practice assessment, and this comes from that. Presentational speaking, this is what the student would have to do at the end of the unit in writing, in speaking. Imagine that you are a student, an exchange student, or no, imagine that an exchange student lives in your house. Think about 4 chores that you and they will have to do and when. And then tape a message orally and explain the chores. Now, if it were me, I would have them write it out first so that they know what it is they're going to read when they tape their message. And I might even check it globally and say, oh, good job. You're right. You're right on track. Muy bien, muy bien, muy bien. Or take out your green pen and say, look, this right here needs a little bit of improvement. Just clean it up a little bit. You're going off a little track here, whatever. In our textbooks also, you will see that there are strategies very often that you can use when you're doing the assessment. This could also be an interpersonal activity. A lot of the activities, most of the activities in Reporteros can be used in a myriad of ways. There's the interpersonal, there's the presentational. You can mix it up any way you want. And in every way you want. You can certainly use them 3 ways if you wish. You can choose some to do one thing and something else. I always like to pair things up. So if they were going to do this, they could do it presentationally, or it could be interpersonally if they are talking to their exchange student and you're explaining, you're the student from here and you're saying, well, hoy tenemos que pasar la aspiradora. And the student says, ¿y por qué? ¿Y cuándo? ¿Y cómo? You say, todas las mañanas o todas las tardes vamos a pasar la aspiradora en el salón principal, en los dormitorios y en los dormitorios. That's one chore. Y todos los días tenemos que sacar la basura. Every day we have to take the trash out. ¿Y cuándo? Por la mañana o por la noche, whenever your household does it. And you can make it an interpersonal rather than a presentational writing or speaking. Next, please. Reporteros 2 is next, and there are some awesome activities here too. Next, please. Presentational writing. Okay, let's see what activity. Pardon me, this is a really good one. The title already says, look, speak, and write. This is a video clip that is of some mountains in Argentina. There is no speech, there's music. So the activity for the student is to look at the image and answer the question, what place in Argentina is this picture from? And then that's the looking at, okay? They have to talk about it and they have to write. Again, writing comes easier for the student than speaking. So I would probably switch that and say, write it out and then present it. Can be taped if you want it, a voiceover, that would be fabulous. And kids are way ahead of me. Technology-based stuff is just like somewhere almost on another planet as far as I'm concerned, but they're real good at this. It can be a voiceover. It could be a commercial to go to these mountains. or it could be, gosh, there are so many things, a travel, if you wanted to do it in writing, it could also be a little travel brochure or even just a poster. And they write out less because in a speech you're going to say more, but something like that can be, and you can use this as a jump off and have other landscapes that would be fabulous to use, just so they can practice a lot of vocabulary and some basic writing and then some more detailed writing. Next, please. For presentational speaking, you are the reporter, and the title, this is a play on the title, of course, reporteros. Every book has different reporteros who are people from various countries in the Spanish-speaking world, and they report on their country. Well, now it's the student's turn to become a reportero. And in this case, they are going to investigate national parks, whether they're national or state-run parks in your community. We have several here in Northeast Florida, so that would not be a challenge for these kids, or it shouldn't be a challenge for these kids. They're going to select one park. They're going to describe its landscape and the animals, and then give several reasons to visit that place. And then they're going to tape a promotional ad with the information and share it with the students in another Spanish class. There's the community tie-in. Community doesn't have to mean outside the four walls of the school. It can be within the four walls of the school. If you share some, and we're going to talk more about this at coming up in another webinar, but briefly, community is anything you want to make it. There's a school community, there's a classroom community, there's a department community, there's a school-wide community, and then you go outside. And, you know, parent night, why not show off what your kids can do? Why not? It's a great way for parents to feel pride in their student. It's also a way to kind of get them off your back as to how much should my student learn. And I want my student to be fluent at the end of 4 years. Yeah, well, no. In most cases, that's not going to happen unless they travel extensively. So anything you can do that will promote your program, yourself, in the parents' eyes, in your administrator's eyes, hey, go for it. Go for it. Hold on with both hands and say, yes, this is something I can do to show off my kids. You're secondary. The kids need to be in the spotlight with this. And here again, there are strategies that you can use. Next, please. Reporteros 3, presentational writing. They're going to write how you met someone special to you. It can be a friend, it can be a neighbor, it can be a family member, whoever it is. It can be real, or it can be someone you invent, your imaginary friend. And you have to answer these questions. When and where did you meet? How did you meet? What did you have in common when you first met? And what things do you usually do together? You're changing tenses here. It's past tense. Remember, it could be either preterite or imperfect. And then you're moving into present tense, things you usually do together. We go to the movies, we go have breakfast, we have coffee at Kookaburra or at Starbucks. Kookaburra is a local coffee shop. And it's a really good practice. And then the cool thing is that they can present this orally as well, the two of them standing together. So this is a great pair activity, because one will introduce the other. And they may have different perspectives on how they met, or a funny story about how they met, or something funny that they did. The same thing might not be funny to both. Okay, next, please. Oh, and there's a starter line there. Presentational speaking. This is a pair activity. They're going to tape a podcast talking about their anecdotes about themselves as not a pair, but as two friends. Remember, that the anecdote has to be about them. It can't be about other people. And then they're going to share that podcast with others in the class, in other classes of the school. That's easy to do these days, and they can tell you how you can do that if you don't know how already. The younger teachers, I'm sure, are very well aware. I'm an old teacher and don't know exactly how I would do that, but I'm sure that somebody in my class would know. Next, please. Reporteros 4 is coming out in June, we hope, this year, and it follows the same format all the way through. Every book comes with a workbook that has a lot of practice activities that you can use for different things. Never just use an activity in one way. Use it and abuse it, because the more practice the student gets, the better the student learns. Remember, students learn differently. I started giving one of those tests of what kind of learner are you, like the second week of school when classes have been already pretty much standardized as far as size goes. And it was interesting to see that some kids don't really know what their style of learning is. A lot of them did because they were already freshmen in high school and they could figure it out. But some of them had no idea. And there were also students who are they learn in multiple ways. So all of the activities can be tailored to different students. It's scaffolded there are scaffolded activities. There are also activities that you can use in different ways, differentiated learning, all of that. One thing that I will say is that if you use Spanish in your class, 90% of the time, at first might be hard. But if you stand at the door and greet your students every day and they respond, isn't that presentational speaking as well as interpersonal? They had to understand you to respond. And if you do that every day, and I know it gets tedious and sometimes you just can't, and that's okay. But if you can, at least 3 times a day, start off that way. Start off with question and answers, your first 5 minutes as a warm-up, so that they get used to answering questions. 1-word answers are okay, remember, at first. And then from there, you just keep adding on. Just a little side note. Next, please. And I think we're pretty close. Okay, from Mapas 4, because we don't have a Reporteros 4, we're going to show you a couple of activities that you can use for presentational writing and speaking. First, the writing. Introduce a person. Oh, well, this is what influential internet people. Present the person you chose and share your analysis of that person with the rest of the class. So you're going to write and you're going to read, speak. You can, or not, you could just make it a presentational speaking. By 4th year, they should have loosened up a little bit and, gotten used to each other and you, and again, remember to give them a rubric so that they know exactly what it is you're looking at and for. Next, please. Speaking for speaking. This is, again, influencers. Are influencers really new? And that's a good question. Are they? Or have we had influencers forever and ever and ever? It's a good debate question, and debating is presentational speaking, so don't be afraid to use that in class either. But it's a good question for them to think about. This is not a, like spur of the moment thing. They're not going to just sit down and start writing, well, I think influencers are really new, blah, blah, blah. No, they're going to need a little bit of research, shall we say. Okay, next, please. There are the same resources in Spanish, Italian, and French, and German, Deutsch. And I think, wow, talk about timing. I don't know how I did it.
You did amazing, as
Phew.
usual. Thank you very
Wow,
much, Linda.
you're very welcome.
Yes, thank you, and thank you, everyone. Before we move on to the questions, we just want to say a few things. So, Your feedback is very important to us. As you can see on the screen, we really want to know what your opinion was, what things you loved, what things we can improve. So please, if you can fill this feedback form, you have the QR code in there, but I'm gonna share in a second the link so you can fill it up and let us know. We will also send it on the email in case you don't have the time to fill it now, but we would appreciate it if you can. And next slide, please.
Can I answer a question that showed up there?
Absolutely, please.
The ancillaries that are available are fabulous. There is the textbook, of course, there's a workbook, and there's a digital platform that has audio tapings and also videos and a lot of activities that you can use. It's a wonderful program. It is an absolutely awesome textbook.
And
Awesome.
I'm going to add that as well in the digital version, it will come with differentiation worksheets and heritage worksheets, an assessment program, including IPAs. And you will have as well access to the transcript for everything, even the test that you will see in the book is you're going to find a audio version in case you want the students to read and practice, and many other things that you can email us at marketing@cletwl.com, and we can give you all the information.
And I saw another question there that I'm going to answer too. There is an elementary school program. It's called Alba y Gael, and you can ask at that marketing at email that was just given to you. You can ask for copies of that as well. It's a really cute book. I have used it with my grandchildren, even though the older ones speak some Spanish pretty well. But still, it's fun for them to do this work. I wish I could show it to you, but because of the background, I can't. But it's a wonderful text, and it's levels 1, 2, and 3, I believe.
Yes, that's correct. Linda, the first question we have, which we kind of discussed and was also kind of answered in the chat, but if you could explain more about the can-do statements and maybe some examples of can-do statements.
I would love to be able to give you an example, but I can't put my hands on them, but they are statements put out by ACTFL that are related to the benchmarks, the standards and benchmarks. So if a standard says, like the first one, the student can or will be able to, the student will be able to blah, 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 however it's stated, I can't remember now. Then there's a statement that says, I can name 3 family members. I can name 3 family members. I can write the names of 3 or the 3 family relationships. It's that kind of thing. And they get more and more difficult, of course, as you go on. I can use the present tense. I can greet my friend in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening. Very basic things at first. And then I need to get a copy of those. I need to find my copy of those because I have them somewhere and but those are wonderful to use. Like I said, I post them. I had them posted in the classroom. But you can get them and give them to the students so that they know what is expected of them. And they can also see, oh, here's one. I can request and provide information by asking and answering a few simple questions. That's what it is. They know if they can or not. If they're unsure, they're not going to answer yes. If they're sure, they're going to check that off and say 1 done and 6 to go or whatever. But they're called can-do statements because they all start off with I can, whatever. Great teaching tool. And it puts the onus on them then.
Fantastic. And on that same line, what is the expectation to achieve from students at the end of Spanish 1, 2, and 3 in regards of novice mid, high, intermediate, high, and so on?
I'm sorry, Sabrina, would you repeat that, please?
Sure,
Just the beginning.
Sure. What is the expectation to achieve from students at the end of Spanish 1, 2, and 3?
Well, that's a really good question. I know we struggled with that when we wrote the standards in Florida. Depends where they come in, to you. That's really tough. I would hope that every student at the end of Spanish 1, for example, would be novice mid to a novice advanced, or high rather, novice mid to novice high, depending on their background. Having said that, some students leave Spanish 1 or first year at a novice low, almost mid. And then in next level, they would be novice mid to novice high, maybe intermediate low at the end. I think if you were shooting for, I always underestimate rather than overestimate, because you feel bad if you've overstepped, and the kids feel bad if they haven't met your expectations. So I'd rather give them a lift by saying at the end of the year, you're going to be novice mid, and they'll all say, I can do that. That's easy. That's easy. And if they do, hey, wonderful. It's time for a celebration. If they don't, they've met the expectations. Again, districts have different ways of judging these. Some districts I've heard still do not use the correct terminology. They call it Spanish 1, Spanish 2, Spanish 3, Spanish 4, or French 1, whatever. They haven't transitioned. They leave it to the teacher to do that. And, teachers vary from teacher to teacher. Schools vary from school to school. Districts vary from district to district. So it's whatever your school really thinks it's where your school thinks that they should be. I can't say it any other way and be truthful.
Perfect. Thank you. Another interesting question is if it's important to include the conjugation of vosotros in the standards of evaluation of the teacher, of course, when speaking about standard Spanish and neutral Spanish.
Well, of course, I would say yes, it's important to include vosotros. If no other reason than the literary one, there are many books that are written by Spaniards who use the vosotros form, and a student is at a disadvantage if he at least doesn't recognize it. Does he have to use it? No, I never forced my students to use vosotros. I always use vosotros with them, but I never forced them to use it. If they wanted to use vosotros, hallelujah. If they did not, they could use ustedes, and everybody was happy. They're still getting the point across. I do think that it's a necessary conjugation of every verb, yes. And that's probably my own Iberian background coming through. But yes, I think it's important to learn.
Fantastic. Also, besides someone who's, of course, thanking you for the presentation.
I thank everybody for attending.
Yes. So this person asks if you have targeted advice for language requirement students who struggle with a language class because they might have low motivation and think of themselves as having no talent for learning a foreign language.
The best answer I can give to that question is that every student is an individual, and you've got to find what motivates that student. I think too that some states who require, which thankfully require 2 years or 3 of a world language in order to get into college, are doing a great thing, because at least it exposes them to a different language, a different culture, or in the case of every foreign language, world language, several cultures. Spanish represents 21 different countries, all of which are different. Yes, we all speak Spanish. Yes, we're predominantly Catholic. Yes, this and yes, that. But there are many differences amongst us. So It's hard to answer that question, and I'm going to be real honest. I have no real answer. So hopefully something that you say or do will captivate that student's interest and convince him or her that it's in his or her best interest to pursue a second language. Some kids just can't and won't ever do it. And they're there because their mom said she asked, you have to take a foreign language. The college you're looking at is saying blah, blah, blah. That should be motivation enough, but it rarely is. It rarely is.
Thank you for that.
Mhm.
Someone asks if will it matter for the semester? I guess this is speaking about the levels, because at their school they have Spanish 1 and the person is trying their best to prove their children an intermediate to advanced level. If
I
you'd
don't
like
think
me to repeat, let me know.
I don't think I understood that question at all. In one semester, you don't go from low to mid, if
Yeah,
that's
will
the
it matter
question.
for the semester? I suppose is the question. Yes.
I mean, I would be surprised if you can go from novice low to novice mid in one semester. And I'd love to hear how you do it if you do. If I'm interpreting the question correctly, then I'd love to know how you do it, because I have no idea how you can make that jump. Oh, okay, there it is. And there it is. How long should it take? I mean, to go from novice low to novice high can take 1.5 years. And then to reach advanced levels, that's hard too. You know, it's hard. And you don't do it in 2 years. I remember a parent coming to me at one of the open houses and saying, how many years of Spanish does my child have to take in order to become fluent? And I just looked at her and I said, okay, well, let's do the math. There are, from round numbers, 30 kids in the class. The class is 45 minutes long. That means they each get about 1.5 minutes to speak every day. And that's when we don't have testing or interruptions with a pep rally or a fire drill or a tornado drill or whatever. And she just looked at me and I said, so let's say for argument's sake, they have 1 minute a day to speak. They go to school 180 days. That's 180 minutes in 1 year. Times 4, rounding up, is 800 minutes. Do you think that a student can be fluent after just 800 minutes of speaking? She goes, well, no. And I go, exactly. So don't expect them to be native or near native fluent at the end of 4 years. Impossible. Unless you send them to study in a Spanish-speaking country for the summer, or they're an exchange student somewhere, then yes, at the end of 4 years, they will be nearing fluent native level. And I mean, that's the truth. And 180 minutes is being generous because of everything I said, fire drills and pep rallies and, you know, all of that, snow days and all of that. So we're lucky if we get 100 minutes in a year.
Absolutely, and thank you for the math. Very important. I wouldn't have guessed it was so little. Another interesting question is if do you teach in the target language since day 1, or do you increase the usage of the target language as the school year progresses?
I'm old school, so I use as much Spanish as I can starting day 1. And then increase it accordingly. The more that we cover, the more they can understand and the more they can do. So, and my theory is always this: if I can teach something using English in 5 minutes, that would take me 3 class periods to explain in Spanish, then I'm going to go for the 5 minutes in English and then practice in Spanish.
Perfect.
Kind of work for the time.
Then great. And let's see, this is going to be the last question. We still have a few minutes if anyone has another one. What can I tell a student when they tell me, I don't want to present my project in class? Can I present it to you along?
That has happened to me. And the answer is, you can present it to me, but you're also going to present it to the class in one way or another. If they aren't comfortable in standing in front of the class, they can tape themselves presenting it, and then I'll be happy to, you know, show it to the rest of the class. And they maybe feel like they're protected a little bit more.
That sounds great. So yes, I think that was the last question. Thank you everyone again for being with us. I hope you have an amazing rest of the day and hope to see many of you later. Have a nice Saturday.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Linda.
Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.